Who's here? Yeah. Okay.
Right on time.
Perfect. Class ends.
No.
You're so diligent.
Okay, Adrian, how are you? Let's call this May 11th, 2023 meeting of the Moose Island Board of Directors to order at 5 o'clock. With that, do I have a motion to establish the agenda this evening?
Seconded.
And second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Directors? Aye. It's 2050 to establish the agenda, and we will move quickly to the superintendent's report.
Great, just a couple of things, but I'll have some announcements a little bit later on. I think we're all set for graduation and getting everything squared away, so I'll get a couple of announcements out on that in a little bit. Wanted to update you on city and the city open enrollment and
You mean like open, like redefining residency or whatever we're calling it, right? Okay, but anyways, continue.
all right. So I spoke with the city manager, and the city manager had kind of put out some information to the city employees and then asked them a little bit more about what this might look like. And she got back to me and she was quite pleasantly surprised that in the coming year, there might be 8 staff members who might be interested. And in the following year, upwards of 20 who would be interested. So it won't be, it could come in waves, but so I thought that was really information that we needed, but also confirmation of a great partnership there. So we'll be continuing forward with the ILA that we'll bring forward for you to be able to review your input on. I'll give a copy to the city manager for them to look at. You will approve first, then it will go to the city council. It goes the other direction on the counselors because they have the majority of the responsibility on that one. So that's kind of how we'll head forward on that. As far as the legislative session, I'll have lots of information for you tomorrow. We've got a great update from WASA at the Puget Sound Educational Service District yesterday. Just some general things that are starting to kind of finally play out. And then there's plenty of mystery that they still need to define and put forward as they roll those out. So the other components that I'll have will either be in recognitions or I'll have a couple of just general updates, but that's later on in the meeting.
I have a question. So those who are interested next year and those who are interested in the following year, is it because, and this is just curious, they have younger kids or will be in kindergarten, or they just want another year or so to transition?
It wasn't that discreet in terms of what the information was, so I don't know quite all of that is because it's a great question. Are these preschool age students who are coming up, or maybe they're hitting that 5th to 6th grade transition? That wasn't disclosed in the survey.
So I just wanted to say, like, initially, I think, this is open board meeting, I was skeptical. I thought that it was maybe like a test balloon for, the traditional way of thinking about open enrollment. But then I paused and I thought about it. And I thought that, hey, like maybe this is an opportunity to think innovatively and pragmatically and with our principles of what it means to have a stake in our community. And I think there's various ways to have a stake in our community, which is unique and a special one. The traditional way is to live here, to have a place of residence here. But another way to have a stake in the community is to contribute to it through what you do during the day. And I'm fortunate enough to be a stay-at-home dad. I give a lot of time to school board matters, and hopefully I've made a difference. But I see, as part of being that fortunate, that I walk my dog, like I'm here in Luther Burbank Park, like every day. And I'm grateful for the people that cut the lawn that my dog walks through. My father-in-law lives with my family, and he has dementia and wandered off into town, and the police returned him. And I'm grateful for that. So I've come to realize, and I thank you, Fred, for putting this on my radar. That I think it's a huge positive of how we can think innovatively and how we can put our principles in play And it's not just the same old, but what it means to be genuinely inclusive with preserving community. And so I'm super excited. I think we'll see how it works, and great idea.
Great. So it'll be your next meeting that will bring that first draft forward to you all. And then that will tee it up so that hopefully in June, it can be formalized on your side, so it can go to the city. They do have a council meeting or two in July, though we don't, and then we'll come back in August, sign off on it, and it'll be in play for next school year.
Excellent.
Thank you. So that's the report for now.
Okay, with that, let's move to full governance process monitoring, fundamental 4, please.
Great. Come on up, high school. So tonight, we've had a couple of elementary principals not feeling well at Fall Hill, and our middle school team, they have sixth grade, incoming sixth grade orientation night for parents. So I will be filling in the best I can for those two teams, but we do have our high school team here for fundamental 4. And so I'll start off with just a few noticings on some of the surveys that we administered, and then allow the high school to dive in as well on those. I think the EES we're at an interesting inflection point with the EES. We saw this, and it's reflected in the data. We saw this massive backslide from COVID, and in our the transition from during COVID to post COVID. And so you can see, even in, for instance, the first response from our 4th and 5th graders from 1920, we were in the 80s consistently to this drop to 46. And what we're noticing when we look at it, and Asha and Andrew, I'd love for you to give insights into our student advisory meeting the other day when we had a chance to look at this. Well, I guess Andrew, that was the one.
I was there.
Yeah, you were there. It was the previous one. It feels like we've stopped we've plugged the dam, but we haven't started making strides back on it. And I think that's pretty reflective as you look in the data now, where the backward declines that we had were now, either holding steady or slight declines or slight upticks. And we're really starting to look at that. I had a conversation with the PTA advocacy leads just the other day, talking about how can we take the data from our EES and get the parent data in front of our advocacy teams or others. So as they're planning things like parent educates, what might they be targeting in terms of moving the needle on our parent perspective? Our students were doing that the same, our staff can do that. And so we're really thinking about how can we really start using this information rather than in a summative way, more of a formative way. And so my commentary isn't so much on these exact pieces, but to say, we have a lot of questions here. We're actually going to be bringing in the Center for Educational Effectiveness with our leadership team in August to do some professional development with us on how we can better leverage this information. So it's not just in our school improvement plans, that it's showing up across the district and bringing it to light. So Asha and Andrew, do you want to talk about the superintendent student advisory? We did some work with this with our students a week or two ago.
Yeah, so we looked at the 2021 data, and then we recently looked at this year's data for EES. And we were mostly looking at what statistics indicate whether student voices are heard. And some of the indicators that we found were like, do they have trusted adults? Do they feel like they belong? Were indicators like of student voice. Andrew, I don't know other indicators. Those were mostly the ones that students were pointing out. And so we kind of were thinking of like ways we can look at the ones that will push forward student voice in our student advisory groups.
It was interesting to see the students go through all of them, and some of them sort of agreed with the scores, and I think other students a little bit more confusion with maybe where they saw the score. So it was interesting to see some, I was seeing some people go, oh yeah, I know it makes sense why maybe that decreased. when looking at this, he said, you know, during COVID, maybe things were handed to me a little bit easier because we were online. So when it comes to figuring out best solutions to the problems, well, maybe I didn't have time to work on it during online. So now in person, I have to build those skills. So we were starting to hear some of those conversations during our student advisory. And it was cool to see how, different indicators were being met and how some were lower, you know, from the 17-18 year to now the 22-23 school year. So it was a neat to look at the 21 and the 23 within a month and to see the progress or decline for what work that maybe students need to keep working on.
Yeah, I think students were shocked at how stagnant the data felt. Because especially like when you go from mask on to mask off, you would think maybe there'd be switches in student behavior, but it felt really stagnant, a lot of the data.
Director Wilkes, you had a hand and then over to.
Oh, no, I think Asha and Andrew answered it. Thank you.
I was just curious if, yeah, these data are really disturbing, and I appreciate, Fred, that you're thinking about how do we use them to be proactive about this, and I was wondering if there were conversation in the larger education, you know, sphere about, when you think about it, it makes sense in that if we're thinking of the COVID as a trauma, and we're talking about trauma-informed care, right, that our students are really at a brain level that the executive function is stunted. And because they've used all that in order just to survive, and especially our younger students who really, you know, and it's kind of consistent with generational, when people go through something traumatic, they're not willing to take risks, or they just, you know, kind of a lot of turn inward, right? And so then on a system perspective, I'm just curious what our conversation about there, because I feel like there are different levels of support. And how are their support of really getting to help our students to rebuild their executive functioning and to really help them to, because we see this at all grade levels going up to higher ed as well. I mean, they'll sit there, stay 5 hours, but they can't absorb because their brain is tired, you know? So how do we help on certain levels? But I also think is we need to be also very intentional about creating opportunities to push our students a little bit more, because I do feel like there might be a hesitancy, you know, to kind of push a boundary when you don't feel safe and secure.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious, like, what are the conversation out there amongst teachers and administrators?
Yeah, one of the things that I'm interested in from the Center for Educational Effectiveness is, you know, where do we sit with between other districts? What are they seeing first? But then as we look internally, when we look at the portion of the survey, and it's only about 10 or 12 days old since we've had it, but when we're looking at it, I'm noticing that in our social emotional learning section of the survey, that's where we actually, amongst students, made the most growth. But we're looking in this fundamental at critical thinking, analytical thinking, and we're not seeing that growth. So maybe there's going to be a lag, and some of that social emotional growth is then going to pull along some of these. But in terms of executive functioning, Nova Williams and I met with a community partner that we've been engaging with since the fall. Principal Wold and I will be talking about it tomorrow. It's on our agenda for our weekly meeting tomorrow. But we have a community partner who's been doing a lot of executive functioning work in businesses, in large organizations, Chevron, some of the others. She has since pulled away from that career and wants to go into the same career, but into the public sector. And so we're talking about 3 different layers within the high school right now, thinking about the universal level is really about, you know, Islander Hour and what we're doing in our classes day in and day out and what they're working. In our secondary level of MTSS, then we're talking about, you know, more specific strategies that we may have for certain students. And there's a course that they're actually adding 2 new sections to next week or next year. Next week would be great to have it next week. That I hope I'm not stealing thunder here is on our directed studies courses. And we've been talking back and forth about how do we make those even more intentional. And so we're talking with a community partner who might be able to come alongside us. So we're actually doing some more targeted instruction in those areas as we start to build skills, strategies, dispositions, mindsets for our students. So that they can tackle the analytical and critical thinking. We can't be, I think we all agree, we want to keep pushing forward. And we've learned from Katrina and others that when you don't, you can just expect this lag effect. So very much in the conversations right now. Erica and Nick, jump in.
I don't want to go down a rabbit hole here, Fred, but as I'm listening to what you're saying, okay.
Hopefully not a positive.
This year, we'll survey our students about 12 different times that are outside of the EES. And so my fear as we talk about the different data points, and I'm sure Andrew and Asha can recall, we do quarterly surveys that deal with our school improvement plans. We did a survey around our 4Bs, and we have EES, we have CMG, which is a part of tonight's report as well. And so my only fear is that our students are surveyed so frequently, and how we compare those data points across EES, across all these, where do we really put all of our interests in the areas of we're really not comparing EES to CMG to our quarterly reports, and then comparing that to our data of academic achievement and our disproportionate marginalized population. So it's just, there's a lot of data to process, and if we're putting all of our interest into EES, I'm curious if students.
I have a question real quick. You said that like survey data, like how much time does that take to fill out on the student's part? Because you seemed a little bit skeptical that like maybe it's burdensome, and I don't know, because you're in the schools, I'm not, like in terms of administration.
Well, I'd love to hear what Andrew and Asha think. The reason why I bring it up, Dan, is that I'm interested to find out if our students who get it every maybe once a month, they get a different type of survey. Yes, and so some of them are 5 to 10 minutes, some of them are 20 minutes, it depends on that. And this one, EES, we really make informed decisions. Our first staff meeting in the year, we use that data to go right in front of staff to talk about how we'll build and form our school improvement plans. EES has been critical for us, but from a student's lens, I'm curious if they find it that same way, because we find great value. But as far as our students, they get one so frequently. I'm curious where they put all of their stock in the surveys that they take.
And if the questions are relevant, or if they could be improved, because sometimes like, I take surveys and like, at least from my perspective, right? Some of them are valuable, some of them are not. Like, if an invaluable like survey doesn't mean like collecting data is like a bad idea, just can mean like the survey is going to crap, right?
Yeah, I personally think that, and I think other students would agree, it's not necessarily like how long the survey is for students, it's like the actual action of going to Schoology, clicking the link and sitting down, doing it. And no matter if it's 5 to 20 minutes, the students have to take the first step and do it. So I think another way that we could look at surveys in the future is maybe combining them and making sure that for all the Islander hour teachers are present, and making sure that this is like a sit down moment where you're gonna have, yes, an extensive amount of time surveying, but you're not gonna have to do it 10 times throughout the year. Because for a student perspective, I probably fill out like, I see y'all push them out, I don't fill them all out, and if I'm not filling them all out, who is, And it's really hard to expect students to do it so many times when you could have like one big long one, or condense, or like codify which ones you're gonna do each year.
And I think, and also, as Tasha said, having a lot of surveys, I think it tends to make them less important. If students are doing 12, then the first 3, they're reading every single question, taking them very seriously. By the 4th or 5th, they might go, yeah, and you might even start to get into, well, maybe students just they open it up, and now they're trying to get through it as fast as possible. So now they're clicking, always disagree, always disagree, always disagree, or always agree, always agree, always agree. So I think it's students have a lot that they're doing. And if they have to do 13 surveys a year, they see it as a arduous task that after the 6th or 7th time, it can get irritating for them to do. There's other things that they would rather do. So yeah.
And we talked about it in one of our weekly meetings that the converse of this is that this is a version of student voice.
Yes.
And so we want to find ways to really capture it in different styles. And so I can understand why we have a couple of variations of surveys throughout the course of the year, but I want our students to really capture that. This is a great way for us as a team to really collate, to understand, and then to help make informed decisions. That's why our SIP plan was made out of that data. And so for students to really understand the power of that voice that comes in survey form.
And I was just gonna say, and I'd also add that not only creating that space to take it, but then what we found with like the CMG survey is maybe there's a little bit of a carrot or the pizza party allowed for, we saw a great increase in students, seniors taking that CMG survey because there was gonna be a competition for the most hour students, including their classes to get a pizza party.
And a shout out to Miss Emery's class who won the pizza party.
Not my
Next week. Director Gilman.
When you mentioned that our students are really surveyed and it made me think about, when you said we have all this data, what do we prioritize? And I mean, we have our fundamentals, but, it does make me think, and I'm not really an expert on this, but, sometimes, what are key indicators that if you take care of it, it takes care of all the other things? So let's say if we have a safe space, right, and we take care of bullying, then that will naturally lead to, a higher increase in academics, right? Or do we focus on critical thinking as an institution that's our primary, and then data about, let's say, safe space and all that might be secondary. But I think that would be, after moving forward, it might be helpful to think about what is essential to the core of what we do. But just like, for example, like if we wanted to reduce crime, they say that, okay, if you repair all the broken windows, right? Then that by itself kind of fixes the crime. So I'd be curious, again, kind of what is that conversation about? What the 2 or 3 really germane indicators that we want to look at that will impact larger, more system change? Because it is frustrating, and then to take on this information and then make sense of it for the community and for the students as well.
I think transitioning to the CMG, that's the civic minded graduate scale that we started using a few years ago. And so Andrews, if you wouldn't mind pulling up the CMG surveys. This, as just a reminder, comes out of the body of research from Indiana University, Purdue University, Indianapolis. And they did the work, and I've done quite a bit of work with this tool. It's mostly for graduates coming out of their undergraduate, but we've applied it to our high school. We did dangle the carrot, so we got much better participation this year. And I don't know if it had any correlation or whether or not we're just doing better, but our numbers improved drastically in this particular survey. The 1s and 2s you want to see go down, the 3s and 4s to go up, or if they go down, you want your 5s and 6s to go up. And when you look across the board, in almost all areas, we saw upward trends in our 5s and 6s from this particular graduating class. Granted, we're not comparing, the same graduate class. So we have last year's to this year's. But I was struck by a few. I know that you were too. As a high school, I saw Mr. Wold's notes in our interviews before. He had some highlights, so I won't steal those. But I was really intrigued to learn more about our graduates, because they seem to have a much stronger commitment to civic mindedness heading out of high school than our group last year. So I don't know if there are spots you wanted to highlight in particular, Erica or Nick. I can throw out a couple too, but I want to give you the first opportunity.
Sure, I mean, a passion area for me is thinking about inclusiveness and creating empathy. And so for example, number 8, when we talk about my high school education therapy to listen to others and understand that perspectives on controversial issues, seen that go from in the 5s and 6s, 42% to almost 58% is a great growth. And then I also think like number 29. My high school experiences have helped me to realize that I prefer to work in a setting in which I interact with people who are different from me. Again, seeing that, number 5 could go from up 30 to 37, just continuing to create those opportunities within our district and school that we're learning about each other and how important that is.
And the one I would add too was 27, which went from, you know, I believe that having an impact on community problems was within my reach. Went from 25% of that to 41% on the positivity there. And then obviously we saw downward on the 1 and 2. So Andrew and his colleagues and friends are headed off into the world. Our hope is to always give them the tools, the skills, the knowledge, the dispositions to excel. I think we moved in a good direction with this particular class. Still have some work to do on Asha's class and the rest of them, which we'll continue to work on greatly on that. So
Real quick, like, I was just sort of reflecting on sort of empathy, I think you said, right? And, I mean, 2 years ago, when I was thinking of what the school district means to me, it was excellence, equity, and empathy. And to that regard, like, I don't know if like it's a textbook in any of the courses, and I'm not suggesting it should be, although like, I guess subtly am, highly recommend the empathy exams, a collection of essays. I forget like the author, but anyways, like in my view, just out of this world about what it means to be genuinely empathetic.
I just wanted to say, you mentioned at the beginning, parent ed, and I do think that when we look at the impact of the pandemic and we're looking at how kids are still continuing to recover from it at different rates and in different ways, depending on how old they were when it hit, right? Like, were they babies? Were they toddlers? Were they in middle school? Were they just about to learn to drive? You know, like, how did it hit them? And I think that what goes on at home is like a big portion of it, not to say that what the schools do doesn't make a humongous impact, and that's what we're here to talk about, but that if there are ways in which the schools can provide support for families, like I know a lot of kids, like 100% of my kids, got into some really bad habits during the pandemic of just being on screens constantly, or on like 3 screens constantly, right? And that didn't go away with the end of the pandemic, right? And so it's like support for parents in like, how do you get your kid off the sofa, out the door, to be helping other kids, to be engaged with the community? Like, that's something that I think we all would appreciate.
So, like,
support with from the district or from this individual.
And tell me if I'm wrong, like Parent Ed is also the group that like sponsors like Race to Nowhere, so like or like shows the film, which I mean, to me, like when I understand sort of the concerns, but it seems to like sort of offset like academic excellence and sort of social emotional health, which like I think well-intentioned, I think is a false dichotomy. I mean, I think it's a long conversation, but I mean, I would say, at least in my view, for anybody who likes Race to Nowhere, again, like to my previous comment, read empathy exams.
Yeah, so, but I'm just talking in general about like that there's a significant home component.
Yes.
So it's not
Yeah.
all on you guys.
Thank you.
why don't you go ahead and go into what aspects you wanted to share from the qualitative?
Yeah, and I appreciate starting with the analytical and critical thinking part. And I think what we're going to highlight tonight, then starts to go into the global citizenship piece of it too. And obviously we created, at least for the high school narrative, there's a lot to read. So I know that you are all able to read that on your own. A few things that we wanted to capture, which I think are powerful. And I think one that I'll start with that, you know, you may, as you follow other school boards, may have seen some of this across our nation. In the first section in the high school from Crest, they do talk about human migration and some of the work that's been done across our country. And then they also talk about the work within Indigenous peoples, but the banned books part, I thought was
There
really.
are books that you can recommend on those, like, I mean, I can think of like Rivers and Tides for Immigration.
I can send you the list. They looked at 12 banned books across our
But
country.
can you think of any offhand?
Yeah, I'll pull it up.
But not offhand, okay, that's
Yeah,
fine.
yes. So what I thought was interesting is that not really in Washington state, but across our country were the banned books that they really looked into and why the school boards made those decisions. And then they got a chance to talk about censorship, what books what parts of the books were actually inflammatory or that really needed more reflection. And then they got a chance to write to those school boards. They got a chance to reflect about censorship across our world. And so I just thought it was an interesting way for our CREST team to really use things that are inside of our global curriculum across our entire world, for us to look deeper at censorship and how it affects them locally. It was just an interesting way to take a look at the banned book project.
Awesome. And I'm gonna hit on a couple of material science and the AP environmental science classes that Ben helped me kind of do some research on here. But as Mr. Wold said, there's a lot to read here. There's a lot of examples, so we're just gonna touch on a few. But with the material science, I think you see that there's a lot of hands-on opportunities for analytical, critical thinking. There's some field trips. They took one to the Chicooley Garden and Glass Museum, and also Edmonds Community College to look at their material science department, and those opportunities to really have conversations afterwards. And having been spent quite a bit of time in those classes too, the ornament drop, some of the activities that they're doing, seeing those conversations take place is pretty powerful. And then moving on to the AP environmental science class, it's truly captures the global concerns and through the lens of looking at analytical and critical thinking through global diversity hotspots. There's a field trip, again, the hands-on learning to Ellis Pond, and looking at water quality. And so that's pretty amazing, just the I get to work with field trips too. So seeing that come in and then hearing about it afterwards is cool to hear what the kids are doing. And then going on, it's studying population dynamics, industrialization and government policies affecting birth and death rates, analyzing soil, climate change, energy sources. So just some really great work going on in those classes. And I think we're excited to see how much kids are doing the analytical and critical thinking.
Couple things on the horizon to talk about with elementary and middle school. I was just talking, actually, as General Collins walks in, we were talking today about robotics, and some of our high school groups are really starting to look at the model that our band and orchestra have set up in terms of how you cultivate interest in elementary schools and build them through. And so Chantel Torrey, who's our robotics club advisor, she's grown that program from 5 to 10, 6 or 7 years ago to 80 kids. She's now going to start next year an elementary piece where we'll bus kids after school up to the high school. And we're also looking at then the middle school component to that, so that we can really build a K-12 robotics kind of continuum. As we look at it, we're also looking at some partnerships with an organization that it's outside of school right now, but we're exploring ideas for ways that we can partner with them. And they're an international organization to really think about bringing and bridging these critical and analytical thinking skills that can happen in these clubs and organizations. How do we infuse them into our school day as well? And even thinking about drama, and how do we bring in our middle and elementary school students into that, because of really the thoughtful way that they've really started bringing to life drama as a critical lens to our society. So you know, I won't go on and on from there, but so excited about some of the things that our teachers and our staff and our principals are really thinking about right now for our students. So that's our report.
Thank you.
Any questions from students? Any other feedback?
I'm taking advice on next year, so I hope it's a good class.
I was surprised to see actually so many more girls than boys signed up for that.
Yeah.
Is that always been the pattern?
Have it?
Yeah. Oh, that's
Yeah.
interesting.
The
I know I'm not on the floor. I have to report, non-trad populations to
Yeah.
the state. And AP Bi-Sci and Biotech actually too, just pull in the girls. And I don't claim credit from our school district. I really, as a former biology teacher and as a bioscientist, the biological scientists have done a great job of incorporating women, so they see themselves there. Makes our job easy.
Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, could I have a motion to find the superintendent in compliance with fundamental 4?
So
Seconded.
And all in favor, students
Aye.
and directors?
I,
So that's, any nays? That's 2050 in favor for fundamental 4. Thank you very much for your report. Lovely to hear. I appreciate the way we consolidated fundamental 4 now. It's really doing a good job thinking about it this way. So thank you. Let's move on to partial governance process monitoring 3A, facilities and capital assets. The long range facilities plan update.
I'm gonna bring Brandy Fox up to the table and then we will bring, there he is, Leroy Landers coming in, from Oregon. And so, we, in our schedule, if you recall, we've had kind of some periodic updates and we've had a couple meetings with our community members. And we have one coming up on Monday and we thought that this was a good time for Director Lurie and Director Glowitz to add context and for our team to bring the whole board up to speed on where we are. Obviously, there's a lot of interest in this and big decisions along the way. So I'll turn it over to you, Brandy.
I think I'll just turn it over to Leroy. He's
Great.
got a good presentation put together. Good to see you.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for inviting me here this evening to share an update of the work that the Facility Planning Committee has been doing over the last few weeks. I did want to make a short apology in that I've been sort of under the weather a bit this last week, so I'm hoping my voice holds out here. If I start to crackle a little bit, that's why. So and so I understand that we want to kind of keep this brief anyway, so I will do that. And if there are any questions along the way, if you want to stop along the way and get a little bit more detail, certainly please feel free to do so. Oh, and I see you've pulled up the presentation already. Great. You sort of beat me to it. So next slide, I guess. Let's just do it that way since it's up. Oh, great. Fantastic. So I'll spend maybe 10 or 15 minutes to just hit this at a really high level. And again, I'm happy to go into any level of detail that you would like to answer your questions. We spent the first couple of months of the effort, which are February and March, really trying to gather updated information so that the new facility planning committee would be able to understand, well, everyone could understand what, if anything, had changed from when the previous facility planning committee had been considering need across the district and coming up with some recommendations. And of course, that need really falls into these 3 main categories of educational program, enrollment capacity, and existing condition. On the April 17th, next slide, please. There we go. We took all the information that we had gathered and in a single miraculous meeting, kind of went through a high-level review of not only the vision and development or for development that was established by the previous committee, but also got into some detail associated with each one of the primary areas of need. Next slide, please. So this is a kind of a single slide example of what had shown them for each of these areas. We started by trying to explain to those facility planning committee members who hadn't had the opportunity to participate in the previous effort, what the overall structure of the long-range planning process is and what the three primary areas of need we would be considering involved. So here you see those: educational program, enrollment capacity, and then facility condition. Next slide, please. And we began the presentation by sharing with the current facility planning committee the previous 2020 committee planning goals. And so they were able to understand how those goals were arrived at and the prioritization process, and then just a little more of the specifics around each one of them. Next slide, please. From the standpoint of educational program, one of the metrics that we shared with the planning committee was a look at the gross square footage per student at each one of your school sites, and also then taking that information and comparing it against national median information and other relevant districts within your region. And so here you see the blue bars represent the gross square footages on your Mercer Island sites, and the sort of brown olive colored bars represent the other relevant districts in your area. Next slide, please. And we gave a few takeaways regarding the specifics of educational program, and identified some of the programmatic need that we had heard in the previous planning process. And then, of course, how much of that need is sort of rolling forward because you're in sort of the same situation programmatically as you were back in 2020. Next slide. And the second area that we talked about involved facility condition, and one of the metrics that we shared with the planning committee involved the assessment scores for each of your sites. And again, and just as a reminder, the lower the score, the worse condition a given facility is relative to your other buildings. Next slide, please. And then, of course, we also looked at capacity and projected enrollment. And this really brought in information concerning your latest updated enrollment projections for the next 10 years. And so this was one of the charts that we had shown, which illustrates in the blue the existing permanent capacity of each of your sites, and above it the modular capacity that's also available on a site-by-site basis, and compares that against the projected enrollment for that site, and identifies the available seats on a site-by-site basis as well. Next slide, please. And we had a few takeaways associated with the new enrollment projections. And we gave the summary of what those projections indicated over the next 10 years at each grade level. And we also gave a total tally of the projected number of seats available. And this would be in permanent space, not counting the modulars, seats available over the next 10 years in the district. So at elementary, you see 454 seats available, the middle school 392, and at the high school level 340 seats. Next slide, please. So last Monday, not of this week, but of last week, we had the opportunity to have our second facility planning committee meeting. So it's the second out of 4. Next slide, please. And we began that meeting after the committee had had a couple of weeks to kind of noodle on the information that they had seen from the previous facility planning committee, and to digest it a bit and think about it. We asked them what their opinion is about whether or not the information they had seen coming from the previous facility planning effort was still legitimate and could be used as a basis for the planning effort. So that included the planning committee goals. We asked them to confirm these goals, and we actually got some good feedback, and we'll be bringing forth to the next meeting a couple of new goals that were added based on the input that we received. Next slide, please. We also asked them then to confirm the facility or existing facilities alignment with those goals. Next slide. So whether or not from a programmatic standpoint or a facility condition standpoint or enrollment standpoint, do your schools align with the goals that have been established? And if not, into the previous committee, here you see a spectrum exercise with on the right, the answer would toward the right would be no, they do not align. And on the left, you would see yes, they do align. And the current facility planning committee felt, I think it's generally fair to say that this assessment of facilities against the goals stood as a solid basis with which to plan moving forward. Next slide, please. We then asked them to confirm the general facility approach that had been recommended by the previous committee to determine whether or not that approach was a solid foundation to continue the planning effort, or was another approach, another direction appropriate. That approach being looking at replacement of the 3 older elementary schools over time, rather than modernization of those schools, a replacement of the older middle school buildings, rather than modernization of those buildings, and at the high school level, a modernization of the high school with overtime, with an emphasis on educational adequacy. Next slide, please. And I should say that the committee, I think, generally felt that that broad approach to the facilities was an appropriate beginning for the conversations that they will be having at the table as they begin to develop more detailed plan approaches. We also gave them a list of items for consideration as they start to move into the actual planning work, the planning effort and exercises. Those considerations specifically included some adjustments relative to the last time the planning group worked on this effort in 2020. At the high school, what it meant that no additions were going to be needed due to the new enrollment projections. At the middle school, additional size and capacity, the replacement of the middle school buildings could really be based on the current enrollment projections rather than the current capacity, and I'll clarify that a little bit in a few moments. The elementary schools, it might be worth considering 2 different capacities, 450 and 600, which I'll outline in a moment, and then various other adjustments and changes that have been made as well. Next slide, please. At the middle school, that capacity question that we're going to be having them consider as they develop sort of plan recommendations is on the left-hand side, you see the existing condition of about 1,300 seats available in the 3 existing buildings. If you were to replace the 2 gray buildings, the 100, 200, 300, and you did it at the same capacity, it would require approximately 105,000 square feet of area, again, for a 1,300 seat capacity. However, based on your projections, it would be reasonable to explore an alternative that actually built the school more in alignment with your 10-year projections. That would mean that you could build up to about 35,000 square feet less and still have 1,000 seats, which would accommodate your 900 student, plus or minus 900 student projection over the next 10 years. And then looking at the various options to be considered at the elementary with regard to replacement of schools over time. If you look on the left-hand side of the diagram, it really illustrates your 4 existing schools with a total of a little over 2,000 seats available. If you were to replace the 3 gray, which are the older elementary schools in your district over time, and you did it at a smaller size per elementary school for 3 replacement, you'd be around 1,800 seats. But another option that is up for discussion is potentially replacing 2 schools and replacing those schools at a slightly larger capacity, which would still more than serve your enrollment projections. Next slide, please. We did a brief overview of the basis for costs because if and when the potential of capital comes into this conversation, it's important to understand the current costs and where they come from. One of those sources, at least as a metric to look at, is the Mortenson Construction Cost Index. And this really tracks construction cost over time, increasing construction cost over time. Next slide, please. And we did a very quick case study that looked at an example very close to home for you, answering the question, what would Northwood cost today? And so we did some basic math, really leveraging the Mortenson Cost Construction Index, which has tracked actual cost increases. So Northwood at 43 million, if you would use that index and escalate the building up to 2023, you'd be at about 69.7 million with some additional allocations for increased requirements over time, which I think is a good sort of conservative approach. It adds a bit more. And our current estimate for a new elementary school at around 450 students is around $74 million in 2023 dollars. But that unfortunately is not the end of the story when talking about cost. If the district or the committee felt that it was necessary to start to discuss bond, looking at capital solutions to address problems, if they felt that was important, you really need to start looking at costs at a point where those buildings would be constructed in the future. And so for purposes of the planning effort, we assumed that the midpoint of construction would be 5 years from this point in time. And again, that's just an assumption at this point. That could certainly change for many different reasons. But if you did that, that 450 student elementary school would now cost approximately $95 million. Next slide, please. And I won't go into this in detail, but we also then sort of reverse engineered that, so to speak, and brought that back to a projected total project cost on a square foot basis. So here in the pink box, you can see some of those projected costs per square foot at the different levels. And again, this was really built up by cross-referencing a number of different sources. So information from our office working together with construction management at Mercer Island, and then also looking at RC cost estimating, which is a third-party cost estimator, and then the Mortenson Cost Construction Index as well. Next slide, please. So here we did share so that everyone understood what some of the items under a quote unquote total project cost would include. So, how does that number get so high? What's in that? And here's just a short list of the items that would be included in that cost per square foot. Next slide, please. And then we wanted to dive into relative to all of the need that's been discussed in each of the categories, that being the educational need or the facility condition need, fixing stuff across the district, or capacity need. What are some potential projects, specific projects that could be related to that need? Next slide, please. And the first of these really involves well, they're not really so much new, but I'll call them recent regulatory requirements by the state of Washington, and specifically the Clean Buildings Act. This is something that if the committee felt a bond was merited and to consider that type of thing, this is really kind of a mandatory component that should be included in that bond, because it will be required to meet the requirements set forth by the state. Next slide, please. And then we also included in several different forms a series of potential projects to consider at each of the school sites. So from left to right, you see the blue boxes are the 3 remaining older elementary schools, and looking at the associated costs of potential replacement of those schools, again, based on the projecting into the future of a midpoint construction in 2028 for each of them, just so that they understood if you did whichever one you might do, what the cost of that would be, or if you didn't replace them, what other projects would really need to be considered, and that's in the blue boxes below that. Similarly for Islander Middle School, what a replacement for that would be, and then the programmatic, the educational program need requirements at the high school and Crest Learning Center, and then finally some condition related improvements at the admin building. And I would note that some of these projects that you see here, for example, the admin building are different, slightly different than what was being discussed in the previous 2020 plan. And that's for a number of different reasons. Things have become more apparent over time in terms of a need, and so brought those up onto the table for consideration. And even now, after we've had our last meeting with the Facility Planning Committee meeting, we have adjusted these numbers and these projects to, I think, better reflect some of the conversations that have come out of even our most recent meeting with the Facility Planning Committee. So this is even a little bit out of date now. Next slide, please. And then finally, we also shared, because it's important when you start to talk about bonds and capital and that sort of thing, what the impact to the taxpayer would be. That's very important. That included information about Mercer Island tax rates and how they compare to similar school districts in the region, so that people could sense what their millage rate or cost per assessed thousand sort of is. Next slide, relative to other districts. And we shared kind of the recent history of bond and levy rates, and this illustration, I think, shows very well how it has trended over time, and that helps, I think, will help the committee have discussions around whether or not the current rate offers any opportunity for a potential bond or not, if they feel that approach is appropriate at all. Next slide. And all of this kind of works into really our next meeting with them, which is coming up on Monday, where we're going to be asking the Facility Planning Committee now to sort of sit down and do the fun and hard work. They will be going through a couple of exercises to really take all the information that they've seen so far, process it, and at its root kind of begin to answer these 3 questions. The first of which is based on what they've seen so far, whether or not they feel a bond is needed or not. If the second one, if they feel a bond is in fact needed, then to discuss and begin to propose what should actually be done first, based on the goals and the prioritization that makes most sense to them as community members. And within that idea of what is being done first, also begin to try and discuss and come up with some thoughts around what they think might be supported by the community, the level of support, the size of the bond. And so those are kind of the core questions that we'll be asking next week. And we're very excited to see what the committee comes up with, see how close they are together or how far apart they are. And with that, that's kind of our summary.
And in addition to Director Lurie and Director Glowitz, we've had Directors Werner and Howison there as well in the room. I think I forgot to give you credit for the hours that you're putting in as well.
As students, do you have any, let's do the people who are present, any comments first?
Building new schools quite expensive.
It'll be $100 million.
Yeah, I think for me, it's like, I think a lot of good people, I think it's just gonna be, closely examining like the line items to make sure that they make sense. I think there's a general feeling that like some of the facilities are aged and trying to make like the most prudent use of community dollars and not like the, like what can sometimes be described as pork barrel patronage when there's a little bit of something for everyone, but try to how to, make the most use of the dollars and recognize that some of our facilities are fairly aged. And then to do like a careful deep dive into each line item and to make sure that we use the community resources in the best way possible. So I'm excited and looking forward to it, and why I hope maybe jumping the shark or whatever the term is, that everyone who's interested, there's a lot of fun work in the district to be done, a lot of important work, and close scrutiny and good conversation.
Jennifer?
So this process has actually been really different than the last one. Last one was much slower with I don't know if I think we met for fewer hours, right? We missed six times. I don't remember if it was 2 or 3 hours, but it just felt like I've seen the numbers for a long time, but I'm noticing that a lot of the questions are coming from people who did not participate last time. And I think we need to I'm hoping we can slow down a little bit and do more explanations of the whys in terms of the proposals that the district is making. I think the district has the best understanding of the status of the facilities and why things need to happen. I really hope that we can do that as a way to not be too adversarial regarding our special interests, and really look at a community in terms of what best suits our entire community. It's really hard to do that. I think that the other thing that is we're gonna need to figure out a way to overcome it. The costs are astronomical, and to the point where people are looking at them like, no way. And I am confident that in our team, knowing what's the last several projects have come in on time and under budget. I don't, but without that experience, it's not that same level of comfort. I think the new slide that you just added about the comparison of the Northwood cost between then and now, I think is really helpful. Because obviously we look at comparisons and, any of us that have done work on our own homes, it's that same level of sticker shock.
I haven't done so much work in my own home, so like, I don't know, but I'm glad that you have. I'll let you continue, go ahead.
It's sticker shock for everyone, and I just want to make sure that we're looking really long-term and, and reality-based, that, I know our home values have gone up, but the amount that we're paying per thousand has gone down drastically. And, we have to figure out a way to find a good
On the
balance.
local level, the amount we're paying per thousand. Okay.
We have to find a way to have a good balance where we meet the needs of our students and do it hopefully sooner than 20 years from now. That's what I'm really worried about too, is the timeline is, I think with the last project it demonstrated that a little bit of a smaller bite is more effective, and easier to swallow. But if we do that again, then we're talking 20 years until we get the facilities up to speed. And it's a question of where do we, basically what is the choice of everybody to make? So anyways, I think it's going really well. I just I hope that it goes along in a conciliatory fashion. It was feeling a little bit less so as the meeting wore on, and I'm hoping that as we get to some of the brainstorming and problem solving that we get back there.
Any questions from Directors Tam and Maggie?
I'm just still processing.
I have some questions. One is, can you give us any kind of little inkling as to what the new goals were that the group added? You mentioned that there were some new goals that could be added to the list, and then I have one other question after that.
Yeah, kind of working off the top of my head, I know that I don't have them here in front of me, but one of the goals involved supporting fine and performing arts. There was no, and particularly I think at the high school level, And there had been no mention or reference of that in the previous goals. And so there was a reasonably, robust discussion about that in the facility planning committee last time when we met. And so it's our intention to make sure when those things come up, if they start to seem like they're garnering support across the committee, to make sure and come back and include those things and update the information. So that was one of them. Yeah.
CCR was the other.
CCR, yeah. Thank you, Brandy, yes.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. I have a question about the three different concepts for the middle school, one of which the one on the right was reducing the footprint, sort of going for like, I forgot what the number was, but for like estimating for like 1,000 students or something like that.
Right.
That seems like a safe bet to make right now, but on the other hand, like we didn't anticipate the pandemic. How do we know we aren't failing to anticipate something where like vast crowds of middle schoolers move on to Mercer Island, And so I'm just curious whether there's been any consideration of kind of building into that more moderate plan a little bit of prep work, so that if we did have to add capacity, kind of like what happened at Northwood with prepping the area that now the Pathways buildings are on, which are just fantastic, right? And so that's just like, since I'm not part of this process, like when I saw that was kind of what I was thinking, like.
Yeah, absolutely. We've talked about that in a 1,000 student approach, we should be thinking about how we would accommodate another 300 students, both through a modular solution and then also designing it in a way that an addition would work as well if that was needed in the future.
That sounds smart. Thank you.
Can I ask a really silly question? I should have asked it at the time and I didn't. So the estimated costs are about 1,000 plus a square foot, right? Right, so am I totally off base thinking, I mean, I think that makes sense too, in terms of, if not, building for the size that we need. But if it's 35,000 square feet, and that's about $35,000, $40,000. Million. Okay.
Yeah.
I knew I was off, because I was like, wait, that just doesn't make any sense. Million, okay,
Yeah.
that's again. Thank you.
Wait, Tim?
Oh, no, I really appreciate that for providing that context. And I think, yeah, the community is important. This is a big chunk, and how are we intentional to take the community along with this process and really dive into where do we want to see ourselves in the next 10, 20 years.
It's been really, really good discussions about, I mean, as our enrollment goes down in terms of talking about different school structures like K-8 and versus, do we rebuild 2 bigger elementary schools instead of 3 smaller ones? Really, nothing's been decided. It's all up for the committee to discuss, but it's gone in really thoughtful directions. And it's very complex. And then also trying to guess, what I love about it too is, we have Toby Soom, who was part of the first bond group that failed. So has that perspective. And then Ralph Jorgensen, who former board director and also part of the second bond group that succeeded. So having those perspectives, I think, are really important since we're talking about the money now and actually building. So, there's some very, very good perspectives.
Thank you for that. Thank you. It's also good to know that there are new people in the group too, coming up this brand new. So I appreciate also your sentiment that we have to bring everybody along, that we take the time for that. One quick question. I think the sticker shock to me is interesting. I think it's a little, the thing would be to compare it for our home prices. When we ran the bond in 2016, we talked about an average home price of about $1.2 million. We move forward now, and really the average home price is about $2.4 million. And if you put that inflation context where your home price has gone, in conjunction with the cost of these schools, I think that it's not as much of a sticker shock. You kind of understand how these things have been growing. And especially for anybody new moving onto the island, I think the perspective is different. So anyway.
That's a huge, I really like that point, that I haven't heard that before. That's great comparison.
We've got, thank you very much. The plan looks great. Appreciate all the hard work you're doing and look forward to continued updates. This is tremendous. I'm very thrilled to see the number of voices and the depth at which you're going on it. And thank you for the participants from the board for sharing your views. Helps us know this is in good hands. We've got recognitions here now, so please, let's move on to that.
Thanks, Leroy. We'll see you Monday.
All right, thank you. Bye-bye.
Should we jump to recognitions? Is that what we're going to do now? That's great. Thank you, Fred.
I think we're okay. We can just have our students come on up if you'd like. Let's start with our DECA group. Come on up, Ms. McClellan, and students.
You guys get to take the seats. And I'll. Yeah.
I got it. Well, here's our DECA group.
You're representative of
That's
our
right.
DECA group. So it's a typical Thursday in our district. So there's a water polo game, there's practices. Baseball, yeah, lacrosse is going on. So as you would expect, our normally we had 20 kids that went. They're all very busy. So I want them to speak because they're amazing, but as the co-advisor on this, just to share with DECA, many of you know, we have some of you that have been judges for us for a million years. My feeling always is I have no business standing in front of these kids. They are incredible, incredible students. And the experience in Orlando with them, first off, intense. If you ever just look at that video to actually see what it looks like when you have 22,000 kids participating, the competition is intense. And so proud of that, but I'd love to have each of you introduce yourself and then the event that you competed in, and then maybe some reflections from the trip. You go first, because you happen to be on my, sorry, you're right here, so you get to go. You know, no, moms and dads, they're fine, just talk.
Okay, I am a sophomore and I competed in the food marketing services event at DECA, and it was my first year going to internationals, and it was just a super fun experience. I really enjoyed like meeting more of the upperclassmen and spending time with people that I wouldn't normally spend time with. So I really enjoyed it. Thank you for making it possible.
I'm Kathy. I'm a current junior at MISD, and I competed in marketing communications. And one thing I thought was really cool was because there were so many kids from all different areas, we could really meet a lot of new people and kind of get to know people from all different places that originally we wouldn't have been able to. So thank you, Ms. McClellan, for bringing us.
I'm Nikesh. I did food marketing, and pretty much I enjoyed the same things as these two said, just meeting new people and not only like from around the country, but also connecting with students I probably wouldn't have normally connected with at our school. So thank you for saying that.
I'm Basma. I'm a freshman. I competed in the business finance series, and I also enjoyed meeting new people and especially meeting the other kids that go to Mercer Island High School. So thank you, Miss.
My name is Damon. I'm a senior. I competed in the International Business Plan, which was a 15-page paper that I presented before the judges. And my favorite part was meeting all the other Washington DECA kids from schools all over Washington that I've never heard of. And thank you, Mr.
None of them are really speaking to what they did, but I would really like to have all of you were amazing, but again, can I just emphasize 22,000 kids? Can I just emphasize that? Those of you that progressed into the semifinals, explain how that went and how that played out.
Yeah, so in marketing communications, what it is it's kind of three parts. First of all, it's like a test about marketing things, but then also some things about finance and business law, etc. And then you also have two role plays, which is where the judges give you a kind of a sort of scenario, and you have 10 minutes to prepare without any device or anything, and you can sort of draw graphs, things like that, and then you give around, I think, 7-10 minute presentation to the judge about how you would solve this problem using the different sort of concepts that they give you in the role play. And I think it was super cool because we were able to kind of hone in on skills that normally we don't necessarily do in school outside of marketing, things like that. And at the end in finals, you have one judge who judges like every single competitor. So it kind of takes out the subjective aspect of DECA, and then people can get awards and things like that.
You went to semifinals, which was amazing when you're sitting there and you get called up on stage. So.
And I did one of the papers, which was slightly different. I got months in advance to write and research a paper, and then 10 minutes to present before the judge. I had months in advance to prepare. I did not use all those months, but I still made it pretty far, surprisingly.
Yeah.
Thanks to my presentation skills, which really carried me, I think. But it was really an interesting experience to present before the judge and then have them ask super deep questions I would never been able to prepare for, and having to come up with answers on the spot like I would in the real world. And that was tough, but also exciting.
Yeah, they're incredible students. Nikesh is our incoming DECA chapter president for next year. So we have a co-situation set up. Each one of them that's coming in, and we're going to be meeting in the next couple of weeks for visioning and what that looks like next year. So we're very excited. So any questions for them? They're used to being put on the spot with really quick questions and thinking on their feet. So any feedback?
Good job. What can the district do to support you guys?
That's a good question.
I don't know about you guys, so I'm a non-matriculated student, which means that I kind of do DECA for fun. It's not like forced in the business classes. And obviously the DECA advisors know this, but it's a little bit harder to thrive, I guess, if you're non-matriculated. And so kind of like providing support for that, I would say would be very helpful.
So just, sorry, I want to get Kathy, always thoughtful. Part of our business classes, DECA is actually part of our curriculum. And we do that precisely for this reason. It's the preparation for the competition, and then the support through the competition is so intense that to do it in a classroom setting, we found that sets our students up for success. Now, is that the model that every school does? No. And you can absolutely run it as a club. So that is something we can look at to provide more support. Really good thought, Kathy.
Yeah, I'm also non-matriculated, so this is my first year doing DECA, and I wasn't part of a marketing class previously, but I was personally really impressed with how organized everything was, and how like, even like as soon as like state came out, like calling staff or sending out emails about what the next step would be and things like that. So I think that overall, like the fact that we have a marketing class for kids who want to take it further is already super helpful. Even for like, for example, me and Liz, it was really easy to get involved in the process.
Yeah.
And then like for growing, I guess the DECA experience, DECA also has like other events. They do like development conferences all over. So if like we wanted to continue to grow like DECA within MIHS, there is a place to grow.
Good question.
Any other questions? Is DECA student led? Is there a student leader? It sounds like from a president perspective, and then you mentor other groups below you?
Well, like we have, me and then Joey Lurie are gonna be presidents next year. So we'll just help Jen and Ms. Tapp run the chapter, and then like our state, we have a state president. I think we have a chapter president as well. So I think DECA tries to prioritize like student voice and having students run most of it.
From a sort of, we're gonna get really dry and boring here, sorry guys. From a compliance standpoint, in the world of CCR CTE, all of our classes were required by the state to have a student leadership component of some sort. So they can take what they're learning in class and apply it in as real world way as possible. Many of our classes take advantage of what we call CTSOs, career technical student organizations, and that would be DECA, HOSA, TSA. We just incorporated as an FFA school as well, but that's our ag side. So the whole point of this is student leadership. We do try to have our officers they run the chapter as much as they can, in terms of support for non-matriculated, things along those lines. And that was part of our meeting as a business and marketing department at high school. We just had a visioning statement for next year is to turn even more, he doesn't know this yet, we haven't done the meeting, but turn even more over to Niket and Jody for next year, for actually what does it look like and how we make it happen.
Just so I'm clear, so like, when you're saying non-matriculate, that's for those that take a DECA course as a class versus those that don't and take it as a, okay, that's what I thought. I just wanted to make sure, like, I don't have any kids in the high school, so sometimes like acronyms and like, I just want to make sure.
I know, there's some, that's we deal, it's.
Like, I get that matriculation.
There's a reason why Kathy and Liz are up here, because they have really extraordinary executive functioning skills, more so than me, like. Most non-matriculated or kids that aren't in a business or marketing class never get to this place because they need that support. These two knew how to reach out and really actually advocate for themselves.
What's the, I'm just out of curiosity, like, what's the sort of like breakdown versus matriculated versus non-matriculated for participation purposes? Like,
Well, I can give you exact percentages, but our
like numbers.
Yeah, numbers. We have 253 students in our chapter at the high school, Rushmont High School, and probably maybe 8 are non-matriculated. Yeah, it's not a large percentage. We tend to discourage it because they're not set up for success.
Yeah, I think I kind of want to grow that number.
Yeah.
I know Mr. Ball doesn't want to, but I want to encourage everyone to be involved in DECA, so. Yeah, I think I want to try and grow that number.
And every school has its own structure, so there's schools that have, that they're completely club. And then students might take the courses, but it's not part of the curriculum.
Well, that's how we operate with our COSA and our TSA and our FFA. That's operated that in that regard. Yeah.
And then for those that are matriculated, is participating in DECA competition part of the requirement of the course or no?
So it is first semester. Every student is required to participate in our area competition, which is that first week in January. And so CCR pays for all their membership, everything, because it's a class experience.
Do
Once.
we pay for those like that are non-matriculated through just like school funds? Okay.
Yeah, because it's
That makes sense. Okay.
and then, once the students that qualify to state, then it shifts to an extracurricular experience. And it's not really discussed much in class after that, because those are the kids that move on.
Got it.
Yeah.
Super helpful. And
No, really good questions. I could chew up this meeting and keep talking, so.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Oh,
What would you guys say is your pitch for DECA? Like, what's the one thing you learned from DECA?
okay. Pitch for DECA.
I used to be a really bad public speaker. I still kind of am, but I've definitely with DECA learned how to speak to people much better. And it's also preparing me on going into business in college. So I feel like it's been a great preparation for me.
For me, I learned how to communicate with other people because since I was a freshman, I only knew like my small friend group that were also freshmen coming into this year. But through DECA, I was able to meet other kids that were older than me at the high school. And I was also able to learn sort of how to talk to other kids who don't go to the high school and go to like schools in other states.
Yeah, for me, like DECA was just a great way to learn a completely new skill that you don't really learn any of the other like core curriculum classes. So just learning how to like not only like communicate, but also like think like about like creating plans and articulate them, I think is a really important skill.
Yeah, kind of similarly, I would say like my strength coming into DECA was being able to like think of things on the spot and things like that. And I think DECA has a really great balance of having to first learn the material for the test and things like that, but then also being able to apply them to a real world situation.
Kind of on a totally different note, but I love doing DECA because I love spending the day with my friends and dressing up, and I do it because I think it's fun. I enjoy doing it, and I love spending the time with my friends in our little business outfits. And you feel like you're older than you are.
I think you all at the door. You all.
Just in closing, just a huge thank you to this district. I get to chat with other DECA advisors across the state, and not everybody has the level of support that we get here. And I so appreciate for DECA, but also CCR and everything that we do. And then also there's risk involved, right? When you send kids out on a trip, and I know some districts don't have that opportunity because of the concern about that. And so I just so appreciate that this district continually putting students first and providing these opportunities, because they really are oftentimes life-changing. So appreciate that. And then lastly, not only are they just amazingly talented, fabulous, competent DECA students, they were also a dream to travel with. And I travel with students a lot. And I have to say my DECA kids, they just are great every year, but you guys were just just dreamy this year. I just as a side note, Becca's curfew nationally is 12:30 and AM, and Washington's curfew is 11:30. And none of them put a fight when they realized, or we told them that the Mercer Island Advisors curfew is about 8:30. Advisors tired. They were.
Just, you know, we have a couple of superintendent student advisory members here. We have, you know, we've known each other since Lake Ridge. To have a freshman make it to globals,
We've
it's
never-
pretty impressive there.
Yeah.
We're all chasing Skyline, trying to take down Skyline eventually. But then also, I'd be remiss not to mention that Nikesh has a sibling in the room right now. It is Asha's sibling right over there, so some of our board members don't necessarily know that, but congratulations to all of you. I did hear about a dance party in the parking lot at the Washington Hotel. I had a renegade son. It's apparent why he didn't do as well. You were probably studying really hard.
Or
and I-
dead by then,
and
yeah.
I had a son who was up there, so I'm glad that you defeated him and his. That's important. So congratulations.
The Issaquah High School advisor is probably one of my favorite advisors. He is just the greatest guy.
Chantel, I believe.
Andrew Chantel, yeah, he's just terrific, so.
Well, congratulations. We're gonna have you take a photo with the board if you would, so come right up here.
Oh, nicely done. You make me look good, so thank you.
You come right up here.
This is ours. Yes.
So we're gonna do parents first, this camera first.
Okay.
So everyone look at this camera on my left so that we are all looking at the same camera.
I think I'm good, thank
And
you.
then we'll go this way. There we go. And now we'll do me. 3, 2, 1. All right, thank you.
Thank you. I know. Oh, yeah, totally.
Okay. We just, couple other recognitions tonight. The month of May is home to a number of recognitions. We have Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. Just a note on that, our students from the Education Coalition for Asian American Representation were nominated and won a Student Leadership Award. They were down at the WASA 110 Awards representing King County. So among some other students, they were able to be recognized by superintendents from across the region yesterday. We also have Jewish American Heritage Month in the month of May, Mental Health Awareness Month. Staff Appreciation Week is this week, and we also have National School Nurse Day, which was yesterday, as well as our appreciation week for our nurses. So a really awesome time of year. I released a video message to our staff today. Typically, this is National Teacher Appreciation Week, sponsored by our PTAs nationally. But we've always had a longstanding tradition that everyone who's a staff member in our organization is a teacher and an educator, and whether or not they are behind the counters making meals for our kids, or in the nurses' room driving our buses, or in our classrooms. Our principal and everyone, we're all teachers at heart and working hard. So we do Staff Appreciation Week in Mercer Island. So we recognize that.
I also wanted to say it's also Military Appreciation Month.
Yes.
And yeah, so like, I mean, I think this, particularly now, as we see with the war in Ukraine and what it sometimes takes for those who literally are willing to put their life on the line for democratic principles. To recognize, and then also like we just have an amazing like VFW hall like in Mercer Island itself. But the significance of those who serve in order to protect the ideals and the freedoms that we enjoy. And I think also for many, the code of honor that comes with the power of serving and knowing that your life might be taken or you might be put in a place to have to take life. So I don't want to forget Military Appreciation Month and the importance of that and all the veterans that serve in our community. And also to that end, the VFW, I'm not sure if it's been updated. There's a very moving and powerful plaque there that lists, I'm not sure if it's up to date, but those in our community who have served in the armed services. So just wanted to put that out there.
Two things on that. Thank you for bringing that up. That was in my May message to the community, was Military Appreciation Week. And also pointing to the end of the month when we have Memorial Day weekend, which oftentimes is kind of the pools open for the summer. And we oftentimes think about in the beginning of summer, but a really important time as a memory of our military community. So thank you for reminding us of that, Director Lovitz.
Thank you.
Those are the recognitions.
Okay, thank you. Let us move back to continue where we left off. After the long range facilities planning, we were on 3B, students on governing boards.
Awesome. Our first part was at the high school and just emphasizing DECA again. We don't need to talk about that more as we just heard from them. Amazing stuff as always. I'm also one of the non-matriculated students who did not make it to internationals, but I made it to state, and I had a blast going and doing it as a senior for the first time. And it's really a good experience just to learn some good business skills and practice interviewing. So it's something that I think prepares students for college or post-secondary things that they want to do. So at the high school band is putting on the Mindy 500 project, which is a fundraiser for their Macy Days parade by selling tickets. So that's on this Saturday from 10 to 3 p.m. And the band is also preparing for their spring concert, which will wrap up the year.
Quick, can you remind me, when's the date for the Macy Day parade thing? I just want to make a note of it. Saturday?
For the Mindy 500?
Yeah.
Yes, this Saturday. Yep. From 10 a.m. to 3. For Earth Week, the school brought in, and Green Team brought in Michaela King to talk about her career in glaciology. Students were able to attend the lunch just to learn more about what she does. She is a professor at UW. And students also had the opportunity to participate in a culture fair on April 25th. And students could help set up stands and give away food and items from their culture, which is really cool.
So AP tests conclude tomorrow, and it's been a long 2 weeks of testing for students. We've had both gyms blocked off and our library blocked off, so students are excited that that will be over, and hopefully their respective AP classes will have a quieter finish for the rest of the year. I think for some students, it lightens their load on finals week because they've already taken their AP test, so there's good and bad to it. The spring sports regular season has concluded and most sports have had their senior nights in the past couple weeks. All of our 13 spring sports are looking towards playoffs except for softball, unfortunately. They went to Kinko, yeah. Some of the highlights this year include girls tennis and golf, track and field, baseball, both lacrosse teams, and boys soccer. All of those teams are looking to make a good run in the playoffs. We hope to earn a couple more state titles. We already have like 3 this year, I think. And just tonight, we are having the girls' last quarterfinal over in the jungle for state, which is exciting. And boys baseball is also playing tonight in a playoff match.
As we end near the end of the school year and graduation, seniors are counting the days that they have left. Prom is going to be on June 3rd with the Monday following that, or sorry, the last Monday before the Tuesday of graduation. So June 12th will be the last assembly, the senior assembly, to recognize the seniors and some of the awards that they have gotten this year. Announced yesterday were the valedictorians and salutatorians. I'm just gonna read off their first names. So we had 11 valedictorians and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And how many?
Oh, wait, how many valedictorians?
11 valedictorians,
And
7
salutatorians. So that is Jillian, Olivia, Emily, Ryan, Garrett, Tom, Harry, Carson, Rachel, Anna, and Alan for our valedictorians. And then our salutatorians is Melly, Miles, Jameson, David, Sarah, and Matthew. So congratulations to all of them for really working hard to get a really distinct honor.
So now down to the middle school drama club is putting on Beauty and the Beast, which will be May 19th and May 20th. The 8th grade transition day to the high school will be on May 31st. And so the high school leadership class is preparing for all the 8th graders to come visit, and the 8th grade leadership class is also preparing for that. So that's in tandem. The 8th graders will have their transition ceremony on June 22nd, will be exciting for them. There will be a 7th grade talent show at the end of this month, which I think it was 6th grade when I was in middle school, but I remember those being really fun. The middle school clubs have all been running smoothly, and they just added a new debate club, which will coincide nicely with the high school's debate program. And lastly, the track and field team at the high school had a joint practice with the track and field team at the middle school. So that was really fun to kind of end up their middle school season as the high school season goes into playoffs.
Starting with the 3rd graders at Lake Ridge, they went to Camp Coleman, as we heard from the 5th graders, and that they had a lot of fun. All the elementary schools are excited about the band fundraisers that are happening this weekend and some more band events that are going on into the summer. At Island Park, they had their Eagle Day, which was a spirit day to wear Mercer Island in Island Park swag that was put on by their 5th grade student council. And the 5th graders are also, the 5th grade student council is also working with their teachers to plan a field day. That'll be happening in June before school's out for summer. Finally, to celebrate the hard work of each of the student councils and the safety patrols, they get to celebrate their hard work by going to the Family Fun Center and hanging out for the day.
So just some overall things, we wanted to talk about the school's foundation Breakfast of Champions, which was in person for the first time in 3 years. It was a great success, and Andrew and I had a great time going and seeing all the families and community members support the schools. We wanted to thank all the students in leadership, Senate, Superintendent Student Advisory, National Honor Society, and even more who volunteered to help out early morning for them. We wanted to thank Executive Director Shub. She said it had been the most organized event ever.
For the students helping out.
Yeah. And then Andrew and I wanted to thank the board for attending the linkage session earlier last month. We also wanted to thank Director Lurie for pushing for this, and Ms. Mueller and Dr. Rundle for organizing it. We're hoping that so this will become a more annual event. And then
With snacks.
with snacks, for sure.
Yes.
And then the last thing is Andrew and I are currently in the process of finding our new junior rep for next year. Dr. Rundle and Director D'Souza have been in the interview process. And by the next meeting, we will have our junior representative picked.
And that's the end of our report. Let us know if you have any questions. Good report, thank you.
What's your news?
My news?
Yeah.
About
Graduation.
I was picked to be one of 2 commencement speakers for the class. We have like orange aprons at the MIS app, like it looks like Home Depot, like it's not even our colors. We called it the prison. Like, if you can figure that out, that would be a great question for executive director shoot when she comes for the linkage. You should ask her that. This is wondering the same thing. We wore it in style. They wore it, but definitely not our colors. What?
I wonder if it was the color of the foundation.
Carol Buss, who is our Director of Nutrition Services, would tell us that an apron is a cape that you wear on the foot. And after you got some news today from WASDA,
Yeah.
correct?
Yes, I just got an email today, asking to attend and speak at the school board, the Washington State Board of Education Board Retreat in June, so that'll be exciting. Andrew will have graduated, but it will be a fun event.
Congrats.
Thank you, congratulations. That's a great report. Any other questions from directors? We're good. Let's keep this train moving then. Item 3C, next up, partial governance process monitoring. So since board policy 1009, board members code of conduct, and board policy 1110, election appointment. So since it's election season, I just wanted to go over kind of the key items, the rules that board members need to adhere to. So all these, references are below, but we can bring up the page, Andrews. It just talks about number one, no campaigning or other political activity may occur in the boardroom or other school district facilities. This applies both to board members and to any candidate.
And servers, right, as well, like, I mean, use of email, like email communications.
Right,
Yeah.
right, any of our facilities, electronic, physical, yeah. No school board member may engage in campaigning or other political activity when representing the board at district or other events. No directing district staff, including through the utilization of private channels of communication for campaign-related activities, or for the establishment of policy with the purpose of influencing the outcome of a school district election. Executive or exempt sessions continue to remain confidential for all of us. And then if there's any uncertainty of policy violation, the board president and the superintendent will render a decision one way or the other. And then if two board members so wish, they may appeal the decision by calling for an executive session in which we'll hear that appeal and then receive and evaluate complaints brought against, in this case, ostensibly the president for making a bad decision. The executive sessions will consist of the full board and the board secretary, where we will be able to debate the merits of the issue at hand. So this is just kind of a boilerplate from now till November, when the election is called, presumably, for us to follow. This is a topic of discussion, opening the floor for any comments or thoughts.
Yeah, it's like a few thoughts. Like, I'm a compliance lawyer. I was just sort of rereading Bad Blood. It features actually an attorney that is from Wilson Sonsini. And due process and public records requests and transparency. I mean, it can sound sort of like sometimes like ticky-tacky, like, like clerical in nature, right? And like not important. But what is due process? Due process is the basis which forms the law. I mean, it is enshrined in our Constitution. That is the rule of the law. And I think some people feel perhaps threatened by the law and would believe that complying with it is burdensome. I don't. I think it's pretty straightforward. I think there's very competent counsel. If there's any questions about what compliance means and looks like, and certain things are pretty easy when it comes to like document production. When I was an attorney, like that's pretty simple. It's just like produce the relevant records and then redact what's confidential. It happens all the time.
Yeah, are you talking about this?
Oh, yeah,
topic here?
yeah,
The election.
I am because this can sometimes seem dry to people, I think, and their eyes just gloss over and it's like, oh yeah, like whatever. But it's really important. It's what like actually allows democracy to happen. And it can sound nerdy and it can sound technical, but like that's what transparency is. That's what the democratic process is. And so I just wanted to like throw that out there. That like sometimes words can seem a bit dry, like maybe the Constitution seems dry to some people, maybe this seems dry to people, but it's not, and it's important. And I look forward to candidates that emerge. I hope that everyone you know, considers running, who may be interested. I think I've mentioned this, like maybe at a previous board meeting when we sort of had an, you know, an information session. You can always withdraw. There's a filing deadline from the 15th to the 19th, which is next week, Monday through Friday. So like, I encourage everyone, throw your hat in the ring, like talk with other candidates, like think about what's important for the district, what we're doing well, what we could be doing better, what your vision is, and contribute to the public debate. And contribute to like how we can prepare for like not just a better today, but a brighter tomorrow. And what your contribution, if you came on the school board, would be. And even if you don't, you're contributing by adding to that conversation, because that's the democratic process. So I look forward to as many people considering. We have a phenomenal district. I'll be just real brief here that like there's a lot of important stuff that goes on and a lot of accomplishments. You know, just a few weeks ago, or maybe just a week ago, sometimes like time has a way of being a little bit mysterious. Like the electric bus, we got a new electric bus. It is awesome. It accelerates really fast, sort of like a Tesla, but in like bus form. It's really like fun. So like, I mean, that's cool. And like, plus there's real world like practicality to that bus, because like for our area, there's 42 miles, like for a daily route. The range is 115 miles. We have variable terrain. So like we can collect data that'll be useful and actionable, hopefully for like other areas in the state that have hilly terrain, but like maybe longer, like daily mileage. And hopefully we can show that we're not just a privileged community, which we are fortunate to live here, but we can be a beacon that shows, by being an early adopter, provide information to other districts. That's like just one thing. A second thing, like financial. I think a lot of people think that like our finances, you know, are just keep going down and like the plane is crashing. And that's not the case. Over the last 9 months that Fred has been here, has really like turned things around. We started the year like $250,000 in the red. According to Fred, like we're gonna be $2 million, $2.5 million in the black. So like that's a positive. And Deborah, you seem like a little bit like, I mean, you talk for a lot.
This has to.
Because I'm encouraging people to run. I think that's.
Sorry, you can
Oh,
report,
Okay, I can do
you
it.
can do this during.
Okay, I can do it.
board
during-
announcements.
Okay, I can do it during board announcements. If that is your preference of where to do it.
Yeah.
Well, I just thought like it goes because I'm trying to encourage people to run and sort of saying like what I think the framework is for running,
That's
which
right.
is what
That's right.
this is, but like.
About ethical behavior.
Well, okay, fine. I'll just do it during board announcements and say like everything we've done well, if that's where you would prefer me to say like
No,
the
that's
brief
fine.
but spectacular last 9 months. I mean, okay, fine, okay.
Okay, any other comments on this process for kind of managing ourselves during the election time? Any other thoughts from other board members? Are you feel good about it?
Yeah.
And you're okay with this decision-making process? So I know that's for discussion, but I'd like to just do a thumbs up then with directors, including students first. Good. And directors? All good? Okay, so with that, we have a process for dealing with this. And how we conduct ourselves and our candidates conduct themselves during this election. Okay, let's move forward. Consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
There's no public input.
Oh, sorry, there was no public input. Yeah, we would have done that at 6. Yeah, thank you for that reminder. Yes. Any motion for the consent agenda?
So, all right, yes.
Yes. Second,
Seconded.
all in favor?
Aye.
Students?
Aye.
Aye. And directors?
Aye.
Aye.
Consent agenda passes 2050. Let's see, superintendent announcements?
Just a few. I haven't checked the list, but in last week's board update, and it'll be again in this one. If you'd like to ride in a bus over to Benaroya Hall instead of driving on your own, we're gonna do dinner in here. And then we'll get on a bus and I'll head over there. So you're welcome to join us for that to save on parking. In addition to the Mindy 500, King 5 ran a story this morning, which will link into the board report as well. Was it this morning that it ran?
It ran yesterday,
Okay.
evening in the newscast, and it's on all of our social platforms and go on the main page of our website.
Great.
But it will be in the board update.
Perfect. Out and about in the community, we've really been getting out and about, and I had a chance to meet with the foundation board this morning. One of the questions I received, which I was so proud to receive, Ian, and I know you weren't there, but I think it's reflective of a lot of work you've been doing, that Andrews has been doing, and that our teams have been doing, is one of the board members from the Schools Foundation said, is it me, or does it seem like our kids are achieving and excelling so much more than they ever have before? And I think they're doing great and whatnot, but I think we're telling our story. I think that the work you're doing, Ian, Andrews with the website, our schools and others, I think we're doing a phenomenal job of really trying to tell our story and get our students out there. And so along those lines, Director Nova Williams and Director Sue-Ann Booby, they hosted the MIPA directors, preschool directors, a couple of 10 days ago. I think I mentioned this at the last board meeting, but they had a great meeting with them. They hosted them for a lunch, and then they did a letters training with them. They're following up with a behavior training. We're going to be pushing into the community preschools to provide services for special education and special services alongside them next year. Other examples, Ian was down at the truck day today at the JCC with our electric bus, and
A lot of excitement. Oh, a lot of excitement for the bus. There were dads and moms like, what? It was great. It was, and our bus drivers there, Oscar and Tom, were great too. They spoke about the bus, the training, what it involved. It was, and kids were excited to get on the bus. It was great. We had about 132, or it was 190 kids in the JCC programs, and we had, we came with 150 bags with goodies and kindergarten information, and we have 18 left, so that's 150 bags of parents and kids about kindergarten enrollment, little fidget toy, talk about the bus, and but the bus was a huge hit.
And 2 weekends ago, you were at the circus down at the middle school,
Same thing. It was a lot of excitement. It was busy from 10 to 12. And I think it got less busy from noon to 2 because I think kids had to go home for lunch and a nap. So it was a lot of fun. And we had Lori Johnson, one of our at the Memphis Circus, talking preschool, and she did a great job interacting with kids. And Dr. Booby came as well, and she was interacting with families and answering questions, and it was great. Yeah.
We hosted our third Realtor meeting or session, I think last week. Michelle has contacts in the real estate arena from former lives and other things, and she's done a great job coordinating. It's been wonderful to connect with them, and we're putting together a welcome to Mercer Island School District package for all of our realtors. It's going to have a bag with our logo on it, Schools Foundation information, PTA information, how to access the district in multiple languages and information in languages, and things about our district. And the realtors all want, 10 and 15 bags a piece, so that this summer, as they're showing homes, apartments, leases, they can be handing them out to our new families as a welcome piece. But they've been a great sounding board for us, I think, giving us some great feedback about what are the number 1, 2, and 3 questions all families want to know when they're talking to their real estate agent. Number 1, how long is the roof going to last? Number 2, how great are the schools? And number 3, how do I register? So we can do 2 and 3, not so good on number 1. We'll leave that to them. And then lastly, we entered into a 3-year partnership with Niche, the online kind of clearinghouse for schools. It's going to allow us to really actually create our own content. So families, when they go, they'll not only see that we're the number 1 school district in the state of Washington, but we can drive them to the content we want, drive them to the pages we want, and then follow them to other sites and know where else they're looking. And then have pop-up ads from our surrounding school district that would go to these other sites. And it also gives us information back about what state they're from, what country they're from. And so Ian and I are meeting, I think, next week to discuss what the platform will look like, though he's already built out a bunch of it. So those are some things out and about in the community that we're working on.
Thank you. That's pretty exciting, actually. Gets more students in here. And now let's move on to, I think, legislative report. Deborah.
I really don't have anything. Things kind of shut down when the legislative session ended. You know what, I think actually before our last meeting, it was really bad news, and miraculously Senator Wellman stuck an amendment in the budget bill, and so things are definitely better than we expected them to be. Not where we hope one day we will get to, but certainly better. And you know, now is the time to kind of, you know, plan for the future in terms of advocacy. I know the PTA is really focusing on the levy amounts, and you know, I think it really demonstrated the effectiveness of advocating together with all the educational partners in terms of special education this year. And you know, lots of voices are more powerful than one. So you know, now everyone's kind of the interim. You know what, I have not looked this week, but the interim focuses are probably listed by now, and we just need to start hammering early.
Yep. Thank you. Tam, any announcements?
Yeah, so I just recently went to the PTA Council DEI committee meeting. And it's like, there's a lot of good conversation. And I'm always reminded about like how supportive and really how powerful our parent community is in adding all of these extras to our community. So I'm very, very thankful. One of the things that I did was the idea project, and for the most part, it went really well. That I think is a very good first step. And how do we start to think about having our students, you know, just to have really like hands-on, intimate connection with those who are have other disabilities and challenges. But then how do we continue the conversation with like, how do we continue this? And it should be a one-time thing, right? Or just like when you learn about cultural diversity, it should just be fun food and festival, which is really great because like I really enjoy you know, the cultural festival and those things. But then how do we start with that, and how do we make sure that we on a systemic level and a curriculum level, we make sure that we take out our values and really implement it out. So there the conversation was kind of around that as well. But yeah, so they've been working really hard and just thinking about you know, moving for next year, how can they get more people involved? And they brought back to the committee members about the linkage, really appreciating the linkage with us. And a lot of people are starting to learn about the system more, like learn about what the board is doing, learn about kind of how we can be in the support, how do they navigate for advocacy. So that's really exciting to see as well. And then another thing was, I'm actually on the IMS field, the South field a lot, right, for baseball and soccer. And I don't know if it's always been that busy because every single time I go, I feel like we're having like 10 tournaments happening at the same time. So like tryout for soccer was I think on Monday, there was a track meet. And I mean, there was just like so many things going on. So I love actually having that complex so we can start to do so many things and really make our community really, like I said, visible. Before we've been doing all these things that maybe spread out, but now we have this one facility where we're all together, which is actually kind of exciting. You know, every single time I go there, I'm like, wow, I feel like I'm in another like place with all the excitement going on, but parking is really horrible. Maybe a 3-minute walk, you know, public spoil. Yeah, so it's always kind of nice to see the decisions that we made and to see the impact on the community. And it's always scary to make big decisions. But then, you know, you go through the process, you trust the process, you involve as many people as possible. And then in the end, you know, you really see the impact. So that's kind of nice to see that.
Thank you, Deborah.
I've had the same experience. I've been down there a lot in the last couple of months and every time I'm there, there's 4, 5, 6 even different sports activities, competitions, practices happening. And I know that's only gonna grow. The only complaint I hear is, why is there not lighting on all of the fields? Which, you know, that's a good complaint, right? Yeah, I agree. I think it's really been fun to see that come together. And the only thing I have done that I haven't talked about is high school PAC meeting was last week, and the school counselors, well, the college and career, I don't know what her title is. Specialist, spoke along with one of the counselors. There's been a lot of talk from high school parents on, we don't know what like timelines are, what should my 9th grader be doing, what should my 10th grader be doing? So they're really working on that now. It's not online yet, but I think it will be soon. And they're not doing it like a checklist, because not everything is for every student, but more of a planning guide, or I can't remember what they called it. But a planning guide, so that like, here are things that you want to do freshman year, and here are things you want to do, you know, in kind of spring, fall, summer. So really helpful, you know, for people going through it the first time, to give some sort of guidance as to hopefully decrease the anxiety, so that you're not thinking you missed something.
Yeah.
Which
They actually pushed out a checklist to all students during and all of the kids were able, the counselors did like a 5 to 10 minute video for every single grade level. And it was like this is what you should be doing, this is what you should be thinking about in your grade in like this spring. And then they said they would do another one in the fall, so what you should do in the fall. So they've been pushing that out a lot.
yeah, it does. Really
We'll be
helpful.
starting a review probably December or January of the coming school year on our high school and beyond plan software. Right now we use Naviance. There are other products out there. So we're going to be starting a review on that in the coming year to really take a look at some of those. Feedback on Naviance in a lot of ways is that it's a lot of box checking and just to get it done because you have to graduate, but it's not really driving decision making. And I don't know if our 2 students, you know, maybe not a full report, but just a couple anecdotal things. Is that the right move to be making in the coming year? Is that thumbs up? We need to do that.
Time for new.
Yeah,
Time
I
for
think
new.
so.
That's what I thought.
And some way that, not the parents, not that we need to insert ourselves in it, but right now, the only way for parents, I mean, I've never seen my daughters. And so, and she shares everything with me and I've never seen it. And so, for parents to have an insight as to what's happening as well, like Skyward, that would be helpful too.
Yes.
Maggie time.
I don't remember if I already reported on the Lake Ridge PAC meeting that I attended, but
I don't think.
I attended it. It was nice. It was nice. We had actually a lot of really good discussion from parents about, you know, about around specifically what was gonna happen. It was very Lake Ridge specific, so it was all about like what was going to happen in terms of how many classes there would be at each grade next year and how those decisions get made within the district and what's the kind of pedagogy around mixed classrooms, for example, and it was a really good exchange. So I didn't really have much to add to that discussion, but it was, I learned a few things from listening to the principal, so, yeah. That's it, that's all I got.
Thank you. Yeah,
That's
sorry to interrupt at the first time.
Yeah, it's like, I was just a list of sort of the accomplishments and some of the highlights, but I think we've hit all of those. I mean, the bus, finances, the band going to Macy's Day Parade. You have to give like interlocal agreement concerning residency and like what it means to be in truly inclusive community. I'm probably missing like a number, but anyway, like a lot of things to look forward to. So yeah, like that's my report.
Good reason for candidates to run.
Yes.
For sure. It's been uplifting and great place to be. We've got great stable leadership, great transparency. I was doing the interviews for the student student director candidates. It's kind of amazing to see how far we've come since you guys first started. So totally appreciated When you interview candidates and they ask questions about what it means to be on the board, you get to really evaluate what we've been doing and how far we've come. So tremendous thanks to Andrew and Asha for all the work they've done, as well as all the interviews they've been spending countless hours on. With that, I am done. Next up, so we are going to recess now into executive session that we hope to start at 8. We will then finish that in at most an hour. If we come back earlier, this meeting will adjourn and there will be no other business that happens after this. The executive session will adjourn, and then this meeting will adjourn. No final business expected.
And board members it'll be on Zoom for board members. Is that how you're doing that? Or are we in person here at 8:00?
I think, since it's about an hour now, if people want to head home and pick up on Zoom, I think that would be fine.
For those that want, can kind of stay here and just like walk around and enjoy, I don't want to like keep people.
We'll be here because we have to keep it open because of open public meetings. So we'll be here to run it from here. So if board members want to stay here or leave and come back at 8, but staff will be here to open it
But by me staying here, like, it's not keeping the staff, like, okay.
No,
I
we have to be here
make
no
sure.
matter what.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. With that, I guess are we okay? Everybody fine? And with that, we will recess till 8 o'clock.
Does anyone want extra range? Like I don't.
First meeting that we're leaving.
Yeah.
You're like laptop, 5, 4, 3, 2.
So I'm calling the board is returning back from recess to this meeting at what time is it? 8 o'clock PM. We will now exit into executive session for 30 minutes to 1 hour at most. We expect to return back and adjourn the session. No business will occur after any of this.
And then a motion to go into executive session.
And with that, could I have a motion to go to executive session?
So moved.
And a second? Okay, seconded by Maggie Ty. All in favor? Aye. Against? Nays? Okay, 5-0. And with that, let's move into exec session. 5-0 to end.
And now, same thing, coming back out of executive session.
This is the school board returning back from executive session. No business will be conducted after this. We're just moving to adjourn now. Could I have a motion to adjourn, please?
So moved. Oh, do I need to say it?
Yes, Director. Second, moved by Director Glowitz, seconded by Director Tai. We have a motion to adjourn. All in favor? Aye. Against? And we are adjourned with 5-0. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Do you mind if I give you these?
Thank you.
Do you want to?
Yes.